Welcome into episode 29 of the Josh Hendrickson Show here on MPW Digital. I'm Neal McCready, joined as always by the star of this show, Josh Hendrickson, the chair of economics at the University of Mississippi. It's Wednesday, October the 9th. Hope everyone's having a good hump day, middle of the week, as we get closer to a big football weekend and all that. But take a little break from all the football talk here to talk about a different horse race. We got T-minus 4 weeks on the presidential election. What are your most recent thoughts?
The media campaign of of Kamala Harris over the last few days has certainly been something to observe. It's sort of in the same way that you can't help to look at a car crash. That is sort of how I compare these media performances. Because when I saw that she was going to do all the media, my first reaction was, okay, they think that she's way behind because, like, you don't just all of a sudden go from doing no media to a ton of media. But then my other reaction was, well, you look at the people that they picked. They were all like very friendly venues for her.
Yeah.
And somehow, despite going to friendly venues, she has done a terrible job in the interviews. And I think part of this is just her campaign. Like, I mean, so her campaign is nonsensical. Like her campaign, we've talked about this before. Her campaign is, I wasn't in charge and thank God that I was, right? Like that's her campaign. And the problem is that like what she's trying to do is she's trying to.
I wasn't in charge, but thank God I was. Okay, yeah.
I mean that's kind of what they're doing, right? They whenever there's something bad about the Biden administration, it's like that was Joe Biden. I didn't have anything to do with that, right? This is, and then
Biden, by the way, has not gotten that memo.
No, but then, when it's a good thing, then she's like, well, I was right there, holding hands with Joe. Just, we were making those decisions together. And that's the campaign that they've run. But then you have this really weird thing where, like, this is a real softball question. She was asked this by multiple people. She was asked this on The View. She was asked this on, like, Colbert. She was asked this in multiple interviews. She might have even been asked this on 60 Minutes. I don't remember. But she's been asked about this multiple times, and it's a softball question. It's the perfect question when your campaign is like this. So when your campaign is, I wasn't in charge, but thank God that I was, that, like, this is the perfect question for you, which is, what about the Biden administration would you have done differently? And the reason that question is a softball question is that it allows you to stay on that message where you can take credit for all of the good things and you can skirt the blame for all of the bad things.
It's a batting practice fastball. Hey, where do you want it? Hey, put it right down the middle, waist high. I need to get a little confidence here. Okay, here it comes. But then she misses it.
Yes. Because then she answers the question by saying, like, nothing comes to mind. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that should come to mind immediately if you're just being honest. Okay, but here's the thing. It's worse than that, because if it was just in one interview, like, you could kind of dismiss it and say, okay, look, she didn't want to badmouth Biden, like she didn't want to come across like, wrong or something like that, or she just blanked out and didn't have something immediately obvious come to mind, and so that was the best answer that she came up with. But she was asked it multiple times, and every time she was asked, she said the same thing. And I mean, maybe that was a strategy. Like, we don't want to look like you can't give a straight answer to the question, but it's like, okay, but you gave a terrible answer, which was, no, it's been great. Right. But your entire campaign is, it's time for a new voice. It's time for a change. It's time to disassociate with the past and all of these things. And, part of that she means Trump, but part of that she means Joe Biden.
Yes.
But then she
because she answered it, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry. She answered a Stephen Colbert question with, well, what would your administration look like? And it's like, well, I'm not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump. And you're like, Okay. Clearly. And then it's, I love America. Okay. Give me something more. And there's nothing more. I interrupted you. I apologize.
No, because I think that's a really good point, because one of the things when they asked, like, what would be different about her administration, which is basically just a way to ask her the question again, like give her a chance to do it again. Then she actually did kind of insult Joe Biden. Like, she gave maybe the worst answer that she could give if she's trying not to insult him, which was something to the effect of, well, I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet because, like, I'm not afraid to have people around who disagree with me or something like that. And it was like, so the implication is that Joe Biden is afraid to have people around him that disagree with it, right? Like, I mean, that's essentially what you implied. So also a terrible answer. And, especially if you're trying to keep the peace. And as you alluded to, I think there is a real concern here about keeping the peace between them, because Biden is out there undermining things that she's saying on the campaign trail on a pretty regular basis now. Like, she was out there talking about, oh, I've tried to call Ron DeSantis and DeSantis doesn't take my phone calls. And then they asked Joe Biden and he's like, oh, yeah, he's doing a great job. He's doing a great job. He takes all my calls.
He's doing such a good job that I gave him my personal phone number.
Yeah.
I mean, he gave him not just a look. DeSantis is known for being very good with emergency response and stuff. So if you were to attack him on that, you're going to look really partisan. I'll give Biden credit. He's smart enough to know that. But Biden didn't have to go over the top. He didn't have to go, oh, yeah, listen, it's been amazing. They're great. They're on top of it. He could have just said, yeah, the governor's doing a good job. I've been in contact with the governor. Stop there.
Well, and if you
didn't have to keep going, right, and keep going and keep going. It was why I texted you and I said, is Biden trying to sabotage her, or is he so senile that he's just lost the game? And your response was, no, I think he's pretty aware of what he's doing here, because you've got Harris on The View literally at that moment talking about how Ron DeSantis is making this a political football.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ron DeSantis is like, no, we've done these with the Trump administration. We've done these with the Biden administration. I've been in contact with the president, referring to Biden. They're giving us what we need. We have a constant dialogue. We've unfortunately been down this road a few times. We've been aware of this. We just dealt with Helene. We're in the process of getting ready for this. Again, he basically praised Biden, but he didn't go overboard. It was just, this is what we do. And it was his way. And then he came back later and clarified it, because Harris vilified him. And he said, look, she's not even in the chain of command on this. These are the people that we deal with, including the president. And these are the people that we've been dealing with. Biden people. And it sort of was like, she is absolutely trying to politicize this storm. And I don't have time for that right now. That's what he said. He comes out of it looking pretty good. Actually, Biden came out of it looking pretty good, because he's working with the Republican governor, taking care of the country. He's the president of the whole country. And she's the one that came out. It was just another gaffe, but it was the first time, Josh, that I kind of wondered, Biden wanted to beat Trump. And history will show that the one time they ran against each other, Biden beat Trump. Biden's not going to be the president come January the 20th at 12:01 p.m. That's the way the Constitution works. There's a part of me that's starting to wonder if this is a guy that's like, you know what? You're not going to be either. He probably isn't thrilled that it's Trump, but I get the sense that these two sides, these two people and their staffs and everything, I get the sense there's a lot of nastiness between them.
Well, there's been reports for a long time that they don't particularly get along. There's been but even setting aside their own relationship, there's been reports for a long time that their two staffs like hate each other. I don't know that I would go as far as to say that he's trying to sabotage the campaign. But I do think he relishes his ability to make comments and make things difficult for her. And I think this was one because here's the thing. When they asked him, about DeSantis, a very easy thing for him to say would have been to say, look, I get what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to politicize this issue. You're trying to make this storm about politics. It's not about politics. I talked to any governor, Republican or Democrat, and they're doing a good job, and leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he could have said, but that's not what he said. What he said is he specifically referenced how he talks to him on the phone all the time and how he gave him his personal phone number and all of these things. Basically, like, he mentioned the phone twice. And that was the point of contention, is that DeSantis won't answer the phone when she calls. And I think that had to have been deliberate, because why would you go out of your way to mention having phone calls with him and giving him access to call you even on your personal number? You're doing this on purpose. Like, he clearly was doing it because he doesn't like her, and and look, it's not a very costly thing. It's not like he came out and said vote for Donald Trump, right? Like,
right.
But he it was basically his way of kind of asserting what authority he has left, and also, like, making her look stupid, because he probably wanted to make her look stupid.
And his wife hates her.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, you all out there, how much you've ever dealt with a woman scorned. Careful. And Jill Biden's angry. She did not want her husband to pull out of the race. She felt, whether right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. She felt that he would win, that he would be reelected. I'm sure that this is not a criticism. I'm sure this would be intoxicating for anyone to have that kind of power, to be on Air Force One, on Marine One, to be in the White House as with the staff and the whole thing. I mean, I'm sure that is an intoxicating thing, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise. Agreed. I mean, that there's a lot there. And to walk away from it when you weren't ready to walk away from it is probably a bitter pill to swallow. And she probably blames, rightly or wrongly, Harris and the Harris people, because Harris immediately goes into this, oh, Joe, I love you, and all that stuff. And I mean, it's kind of disingenuous. Anyone can see it. Got a question from Jay Robertson. Thank you for the super chat. He says, love the show. He says, I like this because you were literally talking about this right before we went on. He says, I would be interested to hear Josh's take on how much to weigh polling versus data coming from the prediction markets.
So I think that where you really want to, I actually think it's not necessarily about either or. Or like even how much weight to give the other. I think, like, to me, the most interesting thing is to kind of look at the polls and look at the prediction markets and actually see where there's some level of disagreement. Like, I mean, if you look at all the polling on Pennsylvania, most of the polling has Harris like slightly ahead, or has, or has them close, or and it's been that way for a long time. But if you look at like Poly Market, which is one of the betting markets, they have Trump at 55% chance to win Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like, okay, that's an odd, that's sort of an odd thing. Also, that same prediction market has Trump at 53% odds to win the presidency. That's much more optimistic than a lot of the polling that you're seeing. So to me, I think that it sort of depends. One of the things that you got to pay attention to is you got to pay attention to sort of how much activity is taking place on these prediction markets. Because one reason that prediction markets could differ from the polls is, like, there's just not very many people participating. So if one person makes a big bet, it just pushes the odds in one direction, and then there's just nobody to make a counter bet that's going to make any difference. But I think that those are certainly things to pay attention to, because when I look at the betting markets, what I'm seeing is that in places like Virginia, where I think that, unless, something crazy happens, I think Harris is going to win Virginia. But you look in Virginia, like, the polling suggests Harris is going to win. The betting markets overwhelmingly suggest that Harris is going to win. And so that's what kind of makes it really interesting to me is when you start breaking down all of these polls, you start looking at all of the different polling, and then you start looking at all of the different prediction markets. All the polling just looks tight, but like there are these certain swing states where prediction markets seem to have it. The prediction markets seem to have like a much more decisive answer than the polls, and I think that that's something that's worth paying attention to.
So Quinnipiac poll out today has Trump leading in Michigan by 4, has Trump leading in Wisconsin by 2, has Harris's lead in Pennsylvania, which had previously been 6, cut to 2. I'm on Real Clear Politics here. What they do is they basically take every poll that has any degree of legitimacy at all and average it all in. So it's just this vegetable soup sort of polling data. So it's not an individual poll. It has nationally, as of today, Harris up by 2. In battlegrounds, it has Trump up by 0.3. It has Trump with 219 electoral votes, Harris with 215, 104 in toss-ups. But if you factor in leans, it's got Trump winning the presidency, 296 to 242. In the battleground states, it's got Trump up 1.5 in Georgia. It's got Harris up 6.5 in Virginia, Harris up 1 in Nevada, Trump up 6.7 in Florida. It's got Trump up almost 1 in North Carolina, Trump up 0.2 in Pennsylvania, so a coin toss. Trump up 1.5 in Arizona. It's got Wisconsin and essentially a coin toss with leaning Harris. Michigan, a coin toss leading Trump. Here's what's interesting. There's a comparing to 2020, same time. In the top battlegrounds, Trump is 4.6 points ahead of where he was in 2020. In the national average, Trump is 7.7 points ahead of where he was in 2020 at this time. And his favorability rating, and I think this is big, because I'm going to get to something that I've been thinking about. His favorability rating is up 10.3 from this time in 2020. And a little theory that I've been marching on, because you can clearly see that the momentum is against Harris. I'm not sure it's for Trump. It's against Harris. It's why they went from this one media strategy to a completely different media strategy almost overnight. There was a Senate candidate in Wisconsin, I believe, a Democratic Senate candidate, who said Harris is losing by 3 here. They all have their internal polling. These are big campaigns. If you're running for Senate in a big state like Wisconsin, Michigan, you've got internal polling people that you trust that are polling the state of Michigan or the state of Wisconsin, who've done it all the time, know how to do it. You trust their data. You agree?
Mm-hmm.
You're not leaving it to Quinnipiac or New York Times, Siena, or anyway. You're not no disrespect to any of those polling, but you want your own polling data because you need to know time is a premium. Now, you're down 4 weeks. Do I need, on a Senate level, do I need to be in Madison right now? Or do I need to be in Appleton? Or where do I need to be? Where do I really need to be focused? Do I need to be focused on men, on blue collar? Do I need to be focused on college-educated women? Do I need to be on suburbans? Do I need to be at every suburban soccer field in Wisconsin right now? What do I need to do? My time is valuable. Ad buys are valuable. We need to be laser focused on the numbers right now. And so when those numbers came out, the Harris campaign shifted. And I went, oh, man, their internals are bad. To me, there's no doubt about that. Their internals are bad. And so she launches into this media blitz. And as she has done it, she has made this election for the first time in a long time about her. The election was about Trump for the longest time. And then we had the first debate, and Biden was a disaster, and the election became about Biden, about Biden's viability, about his ableness to run the country. It became a litmus on him to where no one even paid attention to Trump anymore. And then they shot at Trump, and then Biden pulled out, and the election for a while again became about Donald Trump. And Harris was just this new phenom, and the media is trying to play her up, and she's got this husband who's the picture of masculinity and all these things, right? There's media stuff. But you knew, and everybody said it, and in fairness, the James Carville said this all along. He said, this honeymoon's not going to last. I've done this, and this is sugar. It's going to burn off. There's going to come a point where you're going to have to serve a meal here. You're going to have to put some meat and some potatoes and some kind of a vegetable that's got some fiber to it on that plate. You can't just keep serving some pixie dust. And sure enough, I think this is what's happened now, is that everybody kind of knows. Now, have you ever met anybody in the last month that's like, I just don't know what I think about this Trump guy?
No.
People don't know her. And now it's about her, and she's failing it. She's failing it miserably, because the more people find out about her, they find out, what is she for? Who is she? Does she stand for anything? And the answers are not my answers. The polling data shows that the American public doesn't like her. And I think she's running out of time, because Trump, and I can't imagine how difficult this must be for him, he appears to be sort of staying out of it. His people, at least, seem to me, and I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can tell you are an idiot, and I'll admit it. His people seem to be going, hey, let her burn. Just let her go. Don't do anything right now. Keep your mouth closed. Be cool. I mean, I'm sure he's putting out a tweet here and there, but he's been pretty laid. He's not going to debate again. We'll get into the Walz-Vance debate in a minute, because it was a disaster for Harris. And she's got to figure out a way in the next 26 and a half days to either do one of two things: to prove to people that she has real substance, or to make this about Donald Trump again. Completely about Donald Trump again.
Well, and the problem here that she's facing, I mean, it's very clear that what happened is they looked at their internal polls and she was doing awful. Like, that's the only way, because they've completely changed the campaign. The campaign up to, I mean, she was getting out of cars with earbuds in so she didn't have to talk to the media.
Right.
Okay, that's a deliberate decision. You don't accidentally get out of the car with your earbuds on when you're running for president. That's not a thing. So the campaign was deliberately trying to limit her ability to talk to the media, to answer questions, to go off the cuff. And they were trying to carefully manage her. And what they realized is it wasn't working. Like, initially there was some excitement, but that excitement seemed to really be coming from Democrats who thought they were going to lose, and who hate Donald Trump, who all of a sudden were like, we might not lose. This is amazing.
It was the baseball fan his team was losing by 6 runs, and he was kind of giving up on the game. And then all of a sudden, his team hit a 3-run homer and followed up with a solo homer. And we're only down 2. We're, hey, I you know what? I'm not leaving yet. I am going to go buy a beer and get a bag of peanuts. So let's see if my guys can pull this out.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it was. Is there was I think that the issue is I don't think that they realize how low her ceiling is. And I don't think that they realized that she had hit that low ceiling, like, in that immediate sort of aftermath of her taking over and having the convention and all of and glowing media coverage and all of that stuff. And they've dramatically changed their strategy. And in that dramatic change of their strategy, they're doing, I mean, here's how you know that she's losing. Okay. The way that you know that she's losing is that they are moving closer and closer to Donald Trump on all of the issues. Trump is not changing his positions. They're changing their positions, and they're moving them closer to him. You know, they're starting, like Walz was on like Fox News last weekend or maybe the weekend before that, where he was talking about, you know, like we're in favor of building a wall, right? I mean, come on, right? Like this is not only is this like pandering, okay, but you're literally adopting these positions, and they've been doing this all along. Like Trump is like, oh, no tax on tips, and they're like, you know what, I had a great idea, we're not going to tax tips, right? And it's like the other guy just said that, right? That's not your idea. And like Vance is like, oh, we want to expand the child tax credit, and then they come out and they're like, we want to give you money for every kid that you have. And like it's just like, and they're moving towards him on every policy. That's how you know that they're losing, because what they're looking at the data and they're basically saying, okay, we're doing poorly. If we can just move closer to him, maybe we can pick up some people that we would otherwise be losing by just like advocating for these kinds of policies. So that's number one reason that you know why they're losing. Number two is they completely changed the strategy. It's like, we're not going to do any media whatsoever, to all of a sudden we're going on every show that we can get her on in a 24-hour period. And look, they were all friendly people to her. I mean, I think I think that they expected it to be much friendlier on 60 Minutes than what it was. But
I was going to ask you about that.
But everybody else was like sort of in the bag for her. Like they're, you know, that's Colbert's whole shtick, right? That's, you know, that's The View's whole shtick, right? Is like they, you know, they all hate Trump. And so it was very obvious, like she was going to get treated with kid gloves on these shows, and it was an opportunity for her to do some media and get some positive publicity, or so they thought. The problem is that there was a reason they were keeping her away from this, and it's because she's terrible at it. She is terrible at it. She is terrible when she doesn't have prepared lines to say, and I don't. And it's a.
So why does she want to debate Trump again so badly?
Because she lost. I know you disagree with me on this, but I don't think that maybe she didn't lose, but she didn't win. Everybody proclaimed that she won, but like I said, like I was completely unimpressed with her performance. When the debate was over, I knew exactly what Trump was for. I knew exactly what issues he cared about. When it was over, all I knew is that she didn't like Donald Trump, and she liked to make faces at him, and she liked to, you know, kind of like give him these condescending looks that appeal to her base, but to like swing voters who voted for Trump and then voted for Biden, those people are willing to go back to Trump, and you got to do something for them. And so like making faces at Trump is not the thing that's going to do that. I just think that.
No, you proved to be right, by the way. I mean, I was wrong. I'm shocking that the two of us had an opinion and yours was the right one. But I think live on that debate, and I want to get to a couple of questions here in a second. I think live on that debate, I just thought Trump was losing his composure. But one of the things that I've seen in polling data since then that's been interesting is that the media, a lot of the voting public felt like the media was teaming up on Trump, and they didn't like it. And they still, like you said, they still didn't learn anything about her. And that was at a period where the whole thing was still about Trump. She was still new, and everything was about Trump. And now it's not about Trump. It's about, you're the vice president. We've had this disaster in North Carolina that I think is her. I think it is her Katrina. I really do. I think this is her Katrina. She can't separate herself from the Biden administration, their response. There's too much media out. If you remember, George W. Bush, fairly or not, never really recovered as president from Katrina. Those visuals were too strong. The American people did not like that we were not, the appearance that we were not taking care of fellow Americans. And now I think it's even worse for her. It's my opinion. At a time when you are distributing so much money to Ukraine, when you're having this Israel-Palestine debate, when the economy isn't good, when interest rates are still high, when there's a lot going on And people from Appalachia, am I saying that right? Appalachia?
I think I say, what do I say? I say Appalachia, but I don't know if that's right.
Okay. Either way. Those are kind of like, those are sort of salt of the earth people, right? Those are like on the land people. Those are not slick city folks like us, right? Those are people. They're different. Those are American people. But you kind of envision kind of blue collar, all that, and they can't get help. And you hear some of the stories from that really have got yet to go reported. I think the Helene thing is going to get worse because the death total is going to soar if 1/5 of the stories are true. And they didn't have a response for it. So all of these things are just piling up against her. And again, I mean, I go back to my other point. Is there a path for her to escape it? Sure. Maybe there's some October surprise that's coming, but it doesn't feel like, kind of feels like they've thrown the arsenal at Trump. She's going to have to do something substantive in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because we're running out of time. And people are going to, like, my Carson turned 18 last Friday. Happy birthday, Carson. He registered to vote on Monday. It was the last day you could register to vote in this election. There's a lot there. I think she's in trouble. I want to get to a couple of questions because one of these is along these lines. Tyler Siskey, I think is the name. Tyler something. What percentage of voters are voting against a candidate instead of for a candidate? Your opinion?
Oh, I think it's the vast majority of voters in this election. I mean, look, Donald Trump has very loyal supporters. So there are people who love Donald Trump, but there's also a number of people who hate Donald Trump. And I think that that's really motivating things. And even among the swing voters, I think that that's going to motivate them because I think a lot of it's going to come down to is the swing voters are going to think, okay, the Trump years were kind of chaotic, but times were pretty good otherwise. And so then it becomes a referendum on her. And I think a lot of them are going to look at her and go what is this? What is this candidate? And they're just going to be voting against her. I mean, maybe not as much as they're, as the people who are voting against Trump, but I think it's a significant amount. I think there's a significant number of people who are just picking, that they're voting against the candidate they don't like.
Another question. Cool Joe wants to know, what do you think of Trump visiting New York this late in the cycle? Do you read anything into that at all other than him just doing some media?
I think part of it is that I think that one of the things we've observed, I'm not sure it's actually about the presidential election at all. I think it's actually about some of the House elections because there are a lot of places like on Staten Island, Long Island, there are a lot of places that have become really, really competitive for Republicans. And I think a lot of those visits is designed to try to get out the vote in New York. Because, if you're a Republican in New York, you know that Harris is probably going to win. And so, you're just less likely to show up because Harris is going to win. My vote's not going to matter, that kind of thing. And I think part of it is him trying to get people out to vote, knowing that, they're going to vote for him and he won't win. But these people who are in these House races, those people could definitely win, but they could also lose if you don't show up. And so I think part of it's just to get out the vote effort to try to get as many of those people to the polls as possible.
I mean, I'm on Wall Street Journal right here. So typing up, I was trying to find some headlines because I think headlines are interesting. U.S. frustrated by Israel's reluctance to share retaliation plans against Iran. Did you see where she, in the 60 Minutes interview, was asked who our biggest adversary is? And she said Iran. And I thought it was interesting because it was Iran because of the potential conflict with Israel. And I thought, again, you're not getting it. There's a lot of Americans right now that are really America first. We got problems. We can take care of our own problems. at a time when we got these people in North Carolina, we got this storm about to barrel into the state of Florida. We got stuff here. No, our biggest adversary is very clearly China. The answer to that question is China. That is the answer to that question. There's no other answer. In my opinion, you might disagree. I think China's the answer to that question.
It's also a bizarre answer for her to give because the Democrats have sort of been trying to play both sides here and kind of say like, hey, we stand behind Israel, but then at the same time being like, hey, Israel, you need to kind of knock it off. There needs to be a ceasefire, that kind of thing. They're trying to play both sides of that conflict. So to like single Iran out as like your number one enemy seems like a complete weird thing to do, because if they're our number one enemy and they're Israel's number one enemy, then why are you telling Israel to chill? Right? Like, wouldn't you if they're, so that's a weird thing. But the hurricane in North Carolina. Okay. This is a huge this is a huge event. Like, if we think about it in political terms, it's a huge event, like, because it's very coded in favor of Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why. So, first of all, Trump's big message is America first. And he means that with foreign policy, but he also means that with domestic policy. Like, it's time to take care of Americans. Okay. Mm-hmm. I've been saying pretty much on every episode that if you think about the problems that we're having date back to, I usually say they date back to the financial crisis, but actually I think you can go back one more event, and that's to Katrina. And I think that they start with Katrina because when you have Hurricane Katrina and people saw how the government responded, they were like, what in the world? Like, how do we not have a competent emergency management bureau, right, that can show up and know what to do and take care of these people and know how to get resources where they're needed and organize all of this stuff? Like, how can they be this unprepared? And so you had that, and then you had the financial crisis, right? You had COVID, you had all of these things that where the experts, the institutions did horribly. They performed horribly, like just levels of incompetence that you cannot understand.
Failure.
Yes, it's just like, and the other thing, it's like it's actually like I like to say incompetence because it's worse than failure, because you can do your best and fail.
Okay, that's fair.
Nobody's doing their best here. Okay. Like, nobody is even providing competent leadership.
When you come out, not to interrupt, but along those lines, when you come out and say, in the midst of a disastrous response to a hurricane that has left people dead, we can't find them. We don't know where they are. They're in the mud. I'll tell you where they are. They're in the mud. When this thing clears away, you're going to find bodies, lots of bodies in the mud. Americans. Then you come back, well, it's very important that our response is directed first, essentially, towards the people who come from underprivileged or underrepresented, and you're doing the LGBTQI, whatever. Nobody cares. I mean, I'm going to tell you, you hear this. In the last few weeks, I've traveled to North Carolina. I've traveled to South Carolina. I've been in airports. I do this for fun because I'm fascinated to see what people think. I'm good at it, instigating a very calm conversation where I find out what people think. They are sick of that stuff. They're sick of it. Left, right, sick of it. Sick of it. No, the response in a hurricane should have nothing to do with who's straight and who's gay, who's white or who's black or who's Hispanic or who is identifies as a no one cares, man. It's supposed to be, hey, Americans are in trouble. Let's go help the Americans. And that's where Trump's message, it resonated 8 years ago. And I think it's beginning to resonate again because people are like, you know what? Maybe I don't like him, but I've learned this time that I'm not inviting him over for dinner. I do want our country to be first and not only America second, but hey, we're going to admit it out loud. America second. There's a headline in that Wall Street Journal that I thought was really interesting. It's about her radicalism. See if I can find it. I've got multiple screens up. I'll have to keep looking for it.
Well, let me say this.
Go ahead.
Let me say this about the hurricane, because this is the thing. This is probably the maddest that I've been in a long time about anything involving current events. The way that the United States government has handled this situation is absolutely reprehensible. It's reprehensible. Okay, they have not provided any of the support that you would expect from them. There are people, and here's the thing. This is the thing that really makes me mad. Okay, is that when I talk to people about this, there are some people who like to tell me that, like, I don't know what I'm talking about because they think that I'm just like reading things, or they think that I just read different sources. No, I know people. I know people who are there. I know people who actually know something about what's going on.
In North Carolina.
Yes, and they tell you things. And so this is firsthand information. Like, there are people who are polling. There are people who the very first day that they showed up from elsewhere in North Carolina, right, as part of like the emergency workers from elsewhere in the state, right? They showed up the first day they were there. They found 40 people dead in the mud. 40 people. This is just one small group of firemen. They found 40 people dead in the mud. They found a 4-year-old boy alive, stuck in the mud. They have no idea where his parents are. They have no idea what happened to him. He was all alone, just starving, stuck in the mud. Like, this is a horrible situation. This is something in the richest country in the world that you should have the resources to actually go in and get your people and help them. Like, you should have that ability. They have done nothing. They just they leave them they leave them there. They don't provide them with anything, and then they're completely.
Axelrod said that maybe they won't be able to go vote.
Yeah, and they're completely and totally tone deaf. She ignored the situation. She completely ignored it, as though she was doing this thing again where it's like, I'm part of the administration, but I'm not part of the administration. So like when it happened, it was like, well, we're on the campaign trail. We're not part of this. And so like, she's not doing anything. Then she started getting pressure like, hey, why aren't you going down there? Why aren't you saying things? Like, why aren't you involved? I thought you're helping Joe Biden. I thought you guys, just make all your decisions together. Mm-hmm. And then she goes down there and then she makes the announcement like, hey, look, we're going to do what we can for these people. We're going to give them $750.
Jesus.
Right? Like $750. This is literally the next day. The next day, she tweeted about how they're sending like $200 million to Lebanon for humanitarian aid. How can you be this tone deaf? Like, here's an idea. There's a crazy idea. Let's have America for the Americans. Okay, like, let's actually like it is the United States government. Like, their first priority is the people of the United States. But that's not. But this is not where they're focused. This is not what they're focused on. They don't care. They don't care about these people.
It's why when she says she loves America, I don't think she does. I don't think you do. I don't think you love America. I don't. I'm not going to say you hate it, but I don't think you love it because I know what love looks like.
Well, and frankly, this is one of Donald Trump's strengths, because I don't care if you hate the guy. I don't care if you hate him. Watch him in a McDonald's. Just watch him walk into a McDonald's on a campaign stop and watch him interact with the people and the staff. Like, he's having a blast.
Yeah.
Like he loves that stuff.
No, he loves pressing the flesh.
Yeah.
He likes all that stuff. All right, Grind has a question here. He says, her 60 Minutes interview was awful. Why are the people on her team not giving her good answers for when she's asked, how are you going to pay for this? Also, did she really think she could win an election off of pathos and somewhat ethos when the economy is in the shape it's in? It's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the it's actually really, really hard to figure out what in the world is going on with her and like her handlers. It's really, really hard, because I don't know how you can show up for those interviews and not have answers to these questions. Because it's not just how are you going to pay for this? Like, she doesn't have answers, period. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's like they're giving her advice and she thinks she's way better at this than she actually is. And so she's just going off script because she thinks she's going to give a better answer. Or if they're just not preparing her at all. Or if they're just so convinced that like, hey, the media is on our side, that they're not going to ask us anything difficult, that they're just not preparing her. And so she's going on there. And then when they ask her a difficult question, she's like, oh, crap. Like, what's our position on this? I also think that is another thing, though, too. I think this gets to her radicalism, right? Because the argument has been for a long time, and this might explain why you get this, why she's giving these bad answers, is that it's really, really easy to give answers when you're just being yourself. Like if you just have really strong beliefs and people ask you questions, it's really easy to give answers because like what you believe, and you state your beliefs and you defend them.
Yeah.
I think that, for a long time, there's been this narrative that like, hey, she's only radical. She's only radical because she ran for office in California, and that's how you win. You got to win the base, and once you win the base, you win the election. And that's why, she's been so radical. And then, she's so radical because, we never saw her in a real presidential campaign. She was in the primary, and in the primary, everybody runs to the left. And so the argument has always been is like that all of these radical left-wing opinions that she's had over the years, the argument has been, well, she's had those opinions because that's what helps her win elections. And so like she's had to like, but I'm starting to think that actually this is the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that she wasn't just saying those things to win elections. She believes those things. But she knows that she can't win this election by saying those things. And so when they go, when she goes on to these interviews, I think that part of the issue is I think that like because they're expecting her to give answers that are different from like her underlying, beliefs, that she's finding it very, very difficult to actually, like say the line, right, that they gave her, because that's not what she really believes. And she can't and she can't fall back on what she really believes because she's been told by everybody, like, that's too far to the left. You cannot win. And I think that is the thing, though, is I think that, they kind of overestimated her ability to win this as just being not Donald Trump. That's really why Biden won. But like an underappreciated aspect of that is like there's a ton of like people in the United States who are sort of in the center, like swing voters, like union workers, those kinds of people who kind of like Joe Biden. Like they kind of like him, And so it's like you're not
been around a long time.
Yeah.
Familiar. Again.
Yeah.
People felt like they knew him.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like with her, no one knows anything about her. What they do know about her suggests that she's fairly radical. She's best known for awkwardness. Like she's best known for like awkward interviews with people and like laughing way too long about stuff. Like, I mean, because that's the thing is like
you got to remember, she never won a single delegate.
Right.
When she ran for not one.
Yeah.
This wasn't somebody who was right there on the cusp of being a major player in the party. She wasn't. She was completely obliterated before they even got to Iowa. She dropped out before Iowa.
And that's the thing is that it's like I don't know. I mean, I know, I get it. Like they were stuck. There's nothing else that they could really do. But I think they completely overestimated her ability to just be not Donald Trump and to just be this kind of like likable person. Because that's the thing is like, I'm not even convinced that like if you knew her personally that she wouldn't be likable. But this is the problem. Like she doesn't come across as likable. Like she doesn't. And like, and that's the other thing is like, that's kind of weird to me about this is I also wonder, this is why I said, like, I also wonder if she's getting bad advice, because there are old clips of her where she looks somewhat likable. Like there are these clips where people are like, taking the oath of office for the Senate or something like that. And she's the one administering the thing. And they walk in and like, she like is like joking around with them and she's very like relaxed and she seems like a normal person. But then like when she's in public, like it's just like it's just, everything is incredibly awkward and it's not going to work because she doesn't, her track record on policy is way too radical to win a general election. She gives zero answers. Her campaign message is nonsensical. And it's just, I mean, I'm frankly surprised that she's not losing even worse than she's losing, because Trump is winning, and he's and I think like it, and the way things are going, I've said this before, like I think he's going to win big if it continues this way, and not just
like we know on election night that he won.
Yes, because like it is getting It is it's not just the bad campaign. It's not just the bad policies. It's not just the bad interviews. It's like that she's had opportunities to show herself to be presidential and she has missed it time and time again. Like the hurricane thing was a prime example. Like, she tried to create a presidential moment by like going to the border wall and you see her, walking in slow motion next to the border patrol and, looking at the wall and, asking questions and, and it's very clear. First of all, it's very clear this was a photo op, right? Like they used it in commercials. They've used it in other things, but like she tried to construct that. And look, they all do it. So like, that's not a criticism.
Yeah.
But my point is though, is that she created an artificial setting in which she could try to look presidential. Then you have this humanitarian disaster in North Carolina. Where is your presidential moment? Where are you like showing that you care about these people and that you're on the ground? Even when she initially, like people, I think, I don't think that we've talked about this. Initially, when people were talking about how bad it was in North Carolina and she was saying like she wasn't going to go, they knew that it could possibly be bad for them that she wasn't going to go. So they tweeted out a picture of her. They were like, oh, she's like, and it was like, I might not be there, but I'm keeping track of everything that's going on and I'm staying on top of things. And if you looked at the picture, she had earbuds in. They weren't plugged into her phone.
Saw that.
And she was writing on a piece of paper that was blank.
Completely blank.
So it was like, you didn't even stage a photo op properly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
no
what I mean.
attention to detail at all.
No, this is what I mean.
Well, yeah. And, she's got the Biden people running her campaign. They hate her.
Mm-hmm.
And again, most people who get to this place where you are the nominee of one of the two major parties, they've been through the fire for a couple of years. You know what I mean? I mean, you're running, you're doing serious interviews, you're doing hostile interviews. I mean, go back to George W. Bush, Al Gore, right? Barack Obama. People knew who McCain was. People knew who Romney was. People knew who John Kerry was. These are people who were these were heavyweights in Washington, if you will. You might not like them, whatever. It's not the point. The point was they'd been on Meet the Press. They'd been on Face the Nation. They'd done a lot. They'd done the hardcore interview with, Leslie Stahl or somebody. They'd been through some fire. She really hadn't. She got put on the ticket as a compromise for identity politics purposes. They hit her. I always go back to this, and I do want to get to Tim Walz in a second because I'm fascinated by Tim Walz. Because that decision, like, whoa, even Saturday Night Live made fun of it the other night. Saturday Night Live started making fun of her. I've noticed CNN's turned on her. CBS has started to turn on her. Saturday Night Live is turning on her. I'm like, whoa, everybody's like, maybe these internals are worse than I think. Anyway, what was I saying? I interrupted my own damn thought. I'll either remember or I won't. The other night on Saturday Night Live, they did Washington Part 2, which was fantastic. It was really brilliant. And then they did some Kamala stuff. And in the skit, she's sitting with Dougie, her husband. And at one point she goes, I should have gotten Josh. I should have brought Josh. And he says, Shapiro? And she goes, no, Josh, the bottle is red wine. But it was subtle, right? That, yeah, you should have gone with Shapiro. He is a more proven candidate. He's very, very popular in a state that you can't lose. You didn't go with him because somehow I think she or the people around her felt that Shapiro would upstage her. And so you went with this goofy, unvetted, clearly unvetted. I mean, the biggest decision you're going to make. and you don't vet Tim Walz, and he has been nothing but an anchor on her. He has dragged her even further down. And Trump goes with Vance. He gets criticized. The media does he's weird, he's this. And then they debate, and the debate's an absolute bloodletting from a political standpoint. Walz never had a moment. Vance only had the one thing at the end where he kind of got put in that vice about J6 and the election where he's not going to say it. So he's going to have to take that barrage of hits. But he was so far ahead at that point that it was one. But people liked him. You know who liked him? This is the polling data that's fascinating. Your middle America suburban moms. They really liked him. He's a strong guy, good-looking guy. What they said, I'm reading the stuff. Liked his eyes. He's married. Seems like a good husband. Loves his kids. He came across as normal, not weird, but you sold him as so weird that now not only is he normal, hell, he's John Wayne. It was so bad, the messaging standpoint, and you've presented Walz as Mr. Normal. And he comes across instead as like, he's the weird one. It was a disaster for them. That debate, most of the time, vice presidential debates simply don't matter. Lloyd Benson destroyed Dan Quayle, and it didn't matter. This one, all the polling data shows that no, it gave Trump like a 3 to 4 or 5 point bump that has held. It was a mess for her. Walz, I'll say this, if she wins, may God please protect that woman for 4 years, because that guy cannot become president. He's nuts. He's not, he is, I don't even know who he represents. He is the most bizarre major candidate that I can remember in my memory. And I go back to, I guess Nixon was president when I was born. I don't think we've ever had one that bizarre.
First of all, that debate was debate was over the moment that it started. He walked out on stage. He looked scared to death. Like he was like deer in headlights. And then the first question, they gave it to him, and he was stumbling over his words. He's got like big eyes. I don't know if you saw this, but like the Atlantic had this thing, or I think it was the Atlantic. I don't know. Somebody had this thing where it was like they were evaluating like their facial expressions. And they had this, and they had this thing of him, and it was just his eyes, and he looked scared out of his mind. And they were like, Tim Walz's eyes show his passion for the.
Oh, I did see that. Yes,
for the issues. And it was like, no,
that ain't it.
No, that is the face someone makes when they're tied to a train track and the train is coming. That's not passion. That's not passion. I actually made me concerned because I was like, actually, this maybe explains a lot about the Atlantic. They can't actually read people's facial expressions. But no, it was over from the beginning. And like I said, like it became a meme that like Vance was doing like the Jim Halpert thing from The Office when Michael would say something crazy and Vance would just look at the camera. So like Walz would say something crazy and Vance was just like every time.
Yeah.
And and then also like Walz was so unprepared. Like that like they asked him about why he lied about being in China, and
I'm a knucklehead.
And the story came out that day. And he had to know that they were going to ask it at some point. Maybe they'd push it off to the end of the debate or something, but you had to know that like there was at least a chance they were going to ask you about it because it made CBS News.
Yeah.
So you knew that like, okay, this is CBS News conducting the debate. They mentioned this on their news program. They might bring it up in the debate. And he first gave a complete non-answer. Then they asked him about it again, and he did the worst thing that you can possibly do. Which is he gave this really concise answer where he was like, I misspoke. And if he would have just left it at that, it would have been fine. But then he sat there and there was silence and he couldn't take it. He couldn't take it because he knew that it was bad and he was trying to save it. And literally, that is the worst possible thing that you can do in that moment, is to try to save it. The best thing that you can do is move on.
Let it go.
Just stare right at him and make him ask you another question.
Yeah.
And instead, he sat there in the silence for a second, and then he went back into a justification that was even worse than the first justification. And no, the whole thing was an absolute disaster for him. And also, the other thing is I think people significantly underestimate the extent to which Vance won the debate when he went after the moderators.
Yes.
Because they started the debate by saying, we are just here to ask questions and to moderate the debate. The candidates will fact check one another. And then it was like, we will make a note of something whenever it's relevant. Like, that's what they said.
Mm-hmm.
But they made it sound like that was going to be a very rare thing. And then when the thing got started, it was very clear that this was not going to be fair. Like, so that, they started off with a foreign policy question. And then this was my favorite part. This was my favorite part because I haven't seen anybody talk about this, but it's so ridiculous, is when they went to the second question, Walz had just given a terrible answer to the first question, and they went to the second question, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to survive because this is a terrible question for him and Harris. As they said, let's turn our attention to Hurricane Helene. And I was like, oh, like, he's done, because like they already botched, like, this whole thing. Like, he's done. But then they were like, let's turn to Hurricane Helene. And then they detail all of the devastation and all of the bad things that happen. And then they go, but Donald Trump says climate change is a hoax. And they're like, how do you respond to that, JD Vance? Right. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, you said that your question was going to be about the hurricane, but then you made it about climate change. And this was the most bizarre thing that they did. And then not only that, Vance actually gave like a really good answer, like the best Republican answer I've ever heard to the question, which was, if these people really believed that climate change was happening, they'd be doing this policy, and this policy, and they're not.
Right.
And so why should we even believe that they're taking it seriously? Like, actually, they're just using it as an excuse to implement these other policies that they want to do anyway. That was the best response I've ever heard a Republican kind of give on that. And then he finished, and she was like, and just for the record, a majority of scientists believe that climate change is real.
Yes.
And man-made. And it was like, he never denied it. You literally fact-checked something he didn't say in anticipation of what you thought he would say.
Yes.
And he didn't say that. But the thing so that it started off in it started off as a disaster. But then the other thing is that when they kept correcting him, he had enough. And that was a huge moment, because I've seen politicians, like local all the way up, right? Like, who get mad at a moderator and try to correct them. But generally, when the moderator starts to push back, they stop themselves, because you'd never want to be in an argument with the moderator, generally speaking, right? Because you're going to look petty, or you're going to, or whatever.
And you're a man arguing with two women.
Yep.
You got to be careful there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, she, again, it was a completely irrelevant point. They were talking about Springfield, Ohio, and they were talking about the impact of the Haitian immigrants. And it was a completely irrelevant point at the end where she was like, and just for the record, the Haitians are here legally. Well, I mean, they're here legally through a loophole. They don't have U.S. citizenship. They don't have a green card, right? Like, they're not permanent residents. They're not U.S. citizens. Like, so, and so making that statement, first of all, was irrelevant to what they were talking about, but it was a direct attack on Vance. It was a direct attack to be like, we don't like the way that you talk about this, and so we're going to make this point, because by the way, this is what the media does. And I talk about this all the time, where I say that, like, the problem that we have is, like, so much of what people are learning in school is like deconstruction. Like, it's just how to, like, deconstruct an argument. But it's not how to deconstruct an argument to, like, better understand it. It's a way to deconstruct an argument to make the argument seem wrong or silly in some way. It's just to be critical for the sake of being critical.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. And you see this all the time. Like, because they'll get you on these technicalities. Like I saw this story this morning. And it was about, well, Trump lied about saying that all of this FEMA money was going to migrants and being taken away from, and it was being taken away from the people in North Carolina. And I saw people, including people that I like in real life, who were sharing this and being like, please don't share this misinformation being spread by Donald Trump. And it's not misinformation. FEMA has spent hundreds of millions of dollars helping migrants to the United States. Whether you like it or not, they've spent those hundreds of millions of dollars. And what the article did is it said the disaster relief funds that are specifically allocated for things like hurricanes, those were not used. And it's like, yes, but the same organization was using money. And then the guy who runs that organization came out, or oversees that organization, came out and said, oh, hey, by the way, we don't know if we're going to have enough money for another hurricane because, and so here's the deal. Let's put this in any other context. If I leave here and I go buy a Corvette and then I drive home and I tell my wife and children, you know what? We're not doing Christmas presents this year. It's not in the budget. They're going to look at the Corvette and they're going to be like, what the hell? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I can say to them, no. This is not that comes out of the Corvette budget. I didn't touch the Christmas present budget. There's just not a lot of money in it. That's the problem. The problem is the Christmas present. But no, the money is all coming.
But if there were no Corvette budget, right. There would be more money that you could put into the Christmas present budget.
Right. And so they just, and they can't get this. They can't get this at all. That you can put money into different buckets.
Yeah.
Okay. But money is fungible. You can move it. Like you can move it to these other things. Like you can use it for different things.
Yeah.
But they get them on this little technicality.
Yeah. Your daughter would not buy that.
No.
Yeah. No.
And they get it on that little technicality. And then they act like that's a fact check.
You know what? And we're joking about it. Your daughter wouldn't buy it. And most of America's not buying it either. That's what's killing them.
Yes.
Like there people are, what happened? What shifted? Bullshit happened.
Mm-hmm.
And people see through it.
Yep.
I mean, it's a funny analogy, the Corvette and the Christmas tree and the Christmas presents. But at the same time, it's perfect. Because your kids would look at that and go, come on, Dad. We don't have money for the Christmas presents because you went and bought a car you didn't need. You went and bought a fancy car for you. You put you in front of us. Well, in this case, we put all these other countries in front of us. Had you not spent all that money on illegal immigrants, on aliens, you'd have money for this storm. And no one's blaming. I'm not blaming the Biden administration for what happened in North Carolina. It was a storm. But we would have resources to help those people. You wouldn't insult them in the middle of losing everything with, oh, we're going to give you $750.
Well, there's another thing about this, and I mentioned this to you before, and I should probably sort of dive into this a little bit. I think one thing that makes me mad about this is there's a thing that we all say, and it's true on some level, but it's not literally true. It's like half true. And we all say it. And the thing that we all say, because this is what we were taught growing up, or at least this is what I was taught growing up, and everybody I know says it, so like I assume everybody else was taught it, is that we are a nation of immigrants. That's the line that people give.
Oh, yeah.
And then this is used as a way to kind of justify any type of immigration. Who are you to judge? You yourself came from immigrants, right? Like that's the line. But I want to make a distinction. We are not a nation of immigrants. Okay? We are a nation of settlers. People came predominantly from England. People came predominantly from England to the shores of the United States, what is now the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They came here. They came here in search of a better life. But there's this an important point. The settlement point is an important point. When you look at the literature on economic growth, and you look at the effect of colonization on growth, you basically can like separate colonization into like two categories. Like it's a little crude to do this, right? There's marginal cases that don't really fit into each bucket, but by and large, you can fit them into two buckets. You had colonization that was settlement, and you had colonization that was just extracting resources. Like basically what the Spanish did was extract resources. They showed up, they're taking the gold, they're taking all the silver, they're just hauling it back.
Mm-hmm.
The settlers, the people who came and settled, those places are richer today, right, than the places that, had like the colonization in the form of extraction. And there's a simple reason for that, because when people settle, what do they bring with them? They bring their culture, they bring their institutions, they bring their legal system, they bring their political system, they bring their economic system, they bring their religion, their culture, they bring all of that stuff with them, and they bring that to a new place, and they are settlers. And they're settlers. And so you had these settlers, and the settlers came initially from England, right? Then they came from Germany. Then they came from Scandinavia, right? But the thing that they all kind of had in common is they all kind of shared institutions, culture, everything, but they were settlers. They came and they brought that stuff with them. Like what we have today in the United States is a blend of those people and their institutions and their religions and everything like that. That was the foundation of the United States. From that point forward, you did have immigrants. Immigrants differ from settlers because immigrants came and they might have brought elements of the past with them. That's one of the great things, in fact, about the United States is they brought elements of their culture, they brought elements of their religion, et cetera, to the United States.
Cuisine and such, right.
But they assimilated into the existing culture. That's what makes them immigrants and not settlers, because they assimilated into the existing structure. And the thing that kind of drives me crazy is that the people on the mountain, the people who are suffering, those people are the settlers. Some of those families have been here since before the Declaration of Independence. Okay? And, what is America if it doesn't work for those people? I mean, what is it if it doesn't work for those people? Why do we have endless resources to use on other people, to help people who want to come here, to help people in foreign countries? We have all this money to help them. We have all these resources to help them. We get them the things that they need. And then we have these people. These are families who have been here forever, who settled here, who brought that culture here, who brought their institutions here, who brought all of that in search of a better life. And they came here and they set these things up, and generation after generation after generation has lived on that mountain. And now what? Now something terrible happens, and you can't get people to show up and help them. You can't, they're being given, the response is terrible.
Electric chainsaws when they don't have power.
Yeah. I mean, they're telling them, download the app to get some help. Like there's no electricity. There's no cell service.
No way to, there's nothing to download the app on.
Yeah. The thing.
So is it intentional? Would this response be different in a different place?
It's hard to say whether it would be different in a different place, because it's actually very, very difficult for me to tell the difference between incompetence and malice at this point. Like it's very difficult for me to tell the difference. I don't know if, all of our institutions just seem to be incompetent. So maybe that's what it is. But the thing is that, the response is unacceptable.
Yes.
It's unacceptable.
Yes.
And it's not, and we should not stand for this at all. We should not allow this to be a thing. Like that like this is not, it wasn't acceptable during Katrina. It's not acceptable now. Like you cannot be the richest country in the world and be completely incapable of like getting resources to people who have nothing, who have nowhere to go, and who have nothing, no food, who need food and clothing and a place to stay and all of these things. You cannot like have this inadequate of a response. And and frankly, like I said, I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why people are so attracted to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is like, businessman. And I think that there are people who have a sense in which they're like, look, this guy is probably like this, this guy probably wouldn't let this happen. Like this guy he would figure out how to get things going. And I don't know that that's the case, but I do know that like he showed up right away. Maybe it's just political savviness on his part, but he showed up right away. He was talking to these people. He was walking around. He was talking about getting them supplies. He brought supplies with him. I just like, to me, the thing that drives me crazy is that it's just like we've lost all perspective on everything. Like we've completely lost all perspective. We are like, this is not, the United States is not just a piece of land mass where we have an economy.
Mm-mm.
That's not what this is. This is a country, and we have a government, and the government's job is to look out for its people, and they're not doing that. And not only are they not doing it in this case, it is a pattern that has been going on for 20 years. They can't do anything properly. They can't do anything competently. And it's, and at a certain point, you just look around and you go, when are people going to say enough is enough? Because I'm there. Like I'm
no question.
I'm done with these people.
No question.
This is not like,
Yes.
this is.
I think you're starting to see that, though.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. I think that you are seeing that. I think you're seeing people go, this is stupid. This is unacceptable. This is ridiculous.
We just need people with common sense and some basic level of competence. Just like
Encourage.
just knowing how to do things.
Courage.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the problem, yeah. I mean,
there's a perception, and this has been this part of the strategy, is that, man, if I say anything, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my status, I'm going to lose everything, I'm going to be ridiculed. That, whether that's true or not, that's people's fear, and that was done intentionally. I mean, you have Hillary Clinton just recently. We have to get control, referring to like social media outlets and stuff. I mean, I've told you this many times. I will give them credit for this. Them being Harris and the left, I will. They're transparent on some of these things. If someone tells you who they are, believe them. Just believe them. I mean, Elon Musk was joking and laughing about it, but I was like, dude, he's all in on Trump now. Trump doesn't win, which means Harris wins. I wouldn't want to be Elon Musk, but I'll give him credit. He stood up and said, this is crazy where we're going. This is not right. This is insane. And enough people have to do it. I get it all. I'm sure. I know you get it all the time. I get it all the time. Hey, why do you do this? Why don't you just stick to sports? You're good at sports. Just stick to sports. I get that almost every day of my life.
No, but I think this is a good point, because I want to answer the question. I'm not really doing this for me. Like I don't do this for me. I'm surprised that people want to hear my opinion, right? Like we are very similar people. Like we are very similar people. All I want to do, I just want a house in the middle of nowhere somewhere, right? That's what I want. And I just want to live there, with my family and my dogs, and like just that's it. Just like peaceful life, teach classes, read some books, write some papers like that, just that's all I need out of life. That's all I need. Right. But the thing is I look around and I see I see what's going on, and I see just how corrupt things are. I see how incompetent people are. Look, it's not like this is not costless for me. There are a lot of people who don't like my opinions, right? Like, especially in my profession, right? There are a lot of people who don't like my opinions. This is not costless for me, but I'm doing it because I have the ability to do it, and because somebody has to say things out loud. Like, you should be able to say the truth out loud, and I know that people, and you should have the courage of your convictions, right? Like you should be able to. There shouldn't be a penalty for that. And I mean, part of the reason why I do this is like, I hope that I mean, I hope for people who like what I say, I guess, that like, it at least sends a signal to them that like there are other people out there who think the same.
Mhm.
There are other people out there who are looking at this and saying, this is wrong, or this is bad, or like, how did we get here? Right. And to me, that is, that's important. It's important to have, for people to be able to speak up. And if other people can't speak up, I can speak up. And so I should use that, and I
Yeah.
should say it.
That's literally my answer most of the time is I do it because I can, and it's what I think. And I
Yeah.
think it's important. I think these are things that I'm not belittling sports. I love sports. I mean, I'm sitting here watching sports today. I love sports. But I'm not sure sports matter as much as these things matter. What happened in North Carolina is life and death. What's happening in our country with the immigration issue, and I think it's a monumental problem. A country with no borders is not a country. I think those are things that absolutely have real life ramifications. I mean, if you're an Ole Miss fan and Ole Miss beats LSU on Saturday night, you're going to be pretty happy about it on Sunday. You still got to go to work Monday. If they lose to LSU on Saturday, the sun's going to rise. You're going to get up. Going to be a little coffee's not going to taste quite as good, but you'll be all right. By the middle of the next day, move on to something else. And on Monday, you got to go to work. And little Johnny's going to play his ball game, and you're going to go, and it's going to be okay. These are things that are real. They're real life repercussions to what's happening in the world, and I think that's why everyone should be willing to talk about it. And look, I think there's a move in this direction. I think you see it. Elections shift in 26 days, but if some of the polling data, the betting markets, the way if that shift continues, and if you're right about on election night, we know that will be a monumental statement that a lot of people in the country are just fed up. If they get to that place, I'll say this. One of the things wasn't that long ago, literally months ago, people were criticized for standing up to the biological men in women's sports. And just recently, multiple volleyball teams on the West Coast that were supposed to play San Jose State forfeited. And there wasn't a lot of backlash against them. Instead, what I saw on social media was a whole lot of, hey, this is the way. This is the way. What do? You just say, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to play. You didn't vilify anyone. You didn't call out anybody. You didn't call anybody names. You just said no. You just said no. That's what you did. You just said, no, we're not going to do this. It's wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. It's obviously wrong. You can look at it and see it's wrong. And people are finally starting to stand up. And it took some courage for whichever team was first. I think it was Boise State. They were the first ones that went, we're not doing it. And then somebody else didn't do it. And these are out in some areas, like some of the California, Washington schools, whatever. Like, no, we're not going to do this. And I'm sure that wasn't politically popular with some people, but they said, no, we're not going to do it. And they stood up together. And that was one of the first, as trivial as it was, kind of being hypocritical here. I said sports don't matter. In that case, sports really mattered. People stood up and said, no, we're not doing it. Not doing this. Just not going to do it. We'll take the quote L, but really we're taking a W. And I think you see a lot of that. I think you see people, there's an anger that's palpable about what's happened with the comment about we don't have any money, and her saying everybody's going to get $750. And anybody with any sense knows that, well, that's you can't go anywhere in terms of rebuilding your life for $750. That's insane. And I think people see it, and I think they see through it.
Winston Churchill said that Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted all other options. And and his sort of point is like, Americans will put up with a lot. They will put up with a lot. But then when they're done, they're done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when you look at all the incompetence and craziness that we've experienced, I mean, practically the last, 20 years, I'm waiting for that moment. I'm waiting till we've exhausted all those other options and people say, enough, like, let's actually solve this thing. And I mean, I say this all the time. And I partially say it, to aggravate people, because there are certain people that get aggravated when I say it, because sometimes, I'll especially do it on Twitter, because I'll just tweet something true. And then I'll just say, like, this is true. Don't let people tell you it's not true. And then I will say this thing, which is, we are going to win. And I'd say that because it antagonizes people, but I also say it because I genuinely believe it. I believe that people who just want to live their lives, who want practical, common sense leadership, can have it and will prevail. Because when you are faced with ideologues versus the common sense practical people, the common sense practical people always win in the end. My only concern is at what cost? At what cost do they win?
Right.
And
have you paid such a price by the time you win that it's almost too late?
I mean, the example I give you all the time is, I give you the example of, like, the Spanish Civil War. I always give you this example because you had this, like, leftist government and who, just, like, refused to let non-leftists into power. They refused to, to let them take their seats in parliament, to participate in governance. And which, this is, by the way, is not the story that you will get from a lot of historians, because they're leftists themselves. But this is like, so you had Franco rise up, and Franco rose up because something had to be done. I mean, Franco essentially said enough is enough. And if you listen to the leftists, they'll tell you that, oh, Franco was a revolutionary. No, Franco was a counter-revolutionary. The revolution already started. He stopped it. But the way that he stopped it is that he provided practical leadership. When the Spanish Civil War broke out, the leftists controlled most of the resources. They controlled the heavy industry. They controlled a lot of the agricultural goods, things like that. But the thing is, they squandered all of those resources. Mm-hmm. You know why? Because they were all ideologues and they had no practical knowledge. They don't know how to do anything. They didn't know how to build anything. They didn't know how the economy worked. They don't know how, they can't fix anything. They don't know how to get things where they're needed most. Like, all of the, they were ideologues. They had this belief that they were going to bring about this better society, but they don't actually have any practical knowledge whatsoever. And Franco had the people on his side that had the practical knowledge. And he himself was in the military, so he had a lot of practical knowledge. And they won. And they won. And they not only won, but, like, people from the others who were fighting on the other side were deserting that side because Franco's troops were fed and theirs weren't. Like, I mean, Franco even had, I'm going to butcher this, but I mean, he even had like a motto of his side, which was "No Spaniard hungry." And then he actually took the steps to make sure that was true. The other side didn't do that. They squandered everything. They had all this livestock, and they killed it off because they needed to eat, and they didn't think about, like, actually, how do you raise livestock, and, like, how do you operate a farm, and, like, all of these things. And so, but the thing is like, you can look at that situation and you can say, look, the people with practical knowledge won. Yeah, but it was a civil war. There's a lot of dead people. There's a lot of destruction. Spain's never been the same, since. This is not, and so the thing is yeah, like, the practical people, the common sense people, history says they win eventually, but at what cost? And I think that, like, that's part of why I talk about this stuff, because I see all of this stuff, and you have to say, like, enough before it goes too far, before things just really get off the rails. And I think they're already off the rails. And I just want people to realize that. But I also want people to understand that if you're listening to this and you are just after the common sense, practical stuff, we are going to win. I say that to, provocatively sometimes, but I genuinely mean it. We will win. But the question is at what cost? And I want that cost to be as low as possible. I want to just win with an election and getting rid of incompetent people in the bureaucracy and replacing them with competent people. That's what I want. But we have so much conflict in society. We have so many people who seem intent on destroying institutions. And then we have so many people who seem intent on either helping them or like because they want to, or helping them because they're incompetent. And we can't allow that to happen.
We'll stop there. That was great. Appreciate it. Thanks to everybody in the stream being part of the show. We'll put this up in podcast form here in the coming hour or two or so. Thanks for being with us. We'll have a lot more programming tomorrow, Friday, and into the weekend on MPW Digital. Thanks for being with us. Have a great evening. Talk to you later.